Bonjour! Hey y'all, on this episode of On the Road at the Speed of Mach, we're gonna head into Louisiana, head on into the Big Easy and get us some crawdads and gators. Ooh, it's gonna be a hoot! Alright, I'm sorry if I offended anybody with that terrible Louisiana accent, Cajun accent, whatever you want to call it. But I'd like to draw a comparison to the very beginning of this series when we were in Quebec. That is the now sole French-speaking part of North America. Short history lesson. Back in the day, the French had settled an area they called Acadia. I think it was New Brunswick in Canada. And while the French Quebecese were allowed to stay after being conquered, the Acadians were forced out by the English. And they headed down south to the French colony of New Orleans, in this area basically, and that's why you'll see all the French influence along the Gulf Coast from, I guess, Alabama to New Orleans or even Texas. So that's kind of interesting.
Louisiana is in fact brimming with French influence, but before we take a closer look at this in New Orleans, we're going to check out some swampland just outside the city in Bayou Sauvage. Just over the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway east of New Orleans, this preserve is surrounded by the same levee system that protects the rest of the area from flooding. I was hoping to see some alligators. It looked like a decent enough area to find them, so decided to take one of the water trails through the park with my trusty banana-colored kayak.
See, to me that looks like an alligator nest. Can you hear these things? They sound like this thing. Damn it. So as you can see, it's getting a little cramped up here, and it kind of sucks when you go over these reeds. They kind of make a hissing sound, which is what alligators do. So, get it. Yeah, get it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just a bird sanctuary. So, yeah, and also a little weirded out, not by the alligator thing. I mean, it looks like an alligator can just pop out anywhere, but I'm pretty sure it's just a bird sanctuary, probably. But I'm also kind of worried about the water, because you always hear about flesh-eating bacteria and stuff. Well, we didn't see any alligators, but it's probably a good thing.
Turns out there wasn't any flesh-eating bacteria either, and while I didn't find any alligators to satisfy my 80s dinosaur nostalgia, Bayou Sauvage was full of their smaller cousins. Heading onward to the city takes us straight into New Orleans' fabled French Quarter. This is the most well-known and recognizable section of New Orleans, featuring some of its oldest historic buildings and the many bars of Bourbon Street. While Bourbon Street is part of the French Quarter, and it's all fine and dandy in the daytime, we're going to come back to it a little later at night when it's in its prime. For now, let's take a look at the older historic stuff. While I love using the term Cajun, which in itself is anglicized for the formerly Canadian Acadians, Cajun, you get it, to describe the food and everything in Louisiana, New Orleans is actually Creole. What's the difference, you might ask? Well, the meaning has changed over time. Basically, Cajun is for the Canadian settlers, though it's mixed with the American, German, and other settlers, while Creole was originally intended to describe Louisiana settlers born in the territory while under French or its formerly Spanish rule, seemingly encompassing more Spanish, African, Caribbean, and Indian, with these cultures shaping the differences in food, music, and dialects of the two. But the unifying theme here is French. You can see this all over the French Quarter, of course, from the fleur-de-lis, the tricolor flags, St. Louis Cathedral, cafes, and this statue.
So if you remember back in Quebec City, there was also a Joan of Arc statue, kind of like this one. And it's kind of neat to see the connection between the two historically French colonial areas.
And let's not forget Mardi Gras. With potential roots as a pagan spring festival incorporated into pre-fasting celebrations of Lent, Carnival, as it's also called, is practiced in Catholic regions all over the world, from Germany to Brazil. The iconic New Orleans variety was originally started by French settlers, abolished by the Spanish, then revived in the early 1800s under American rule. And speaking of American rule, Jackson Square is named after the same statue guy we keep saying. He defended the recently purchased New Orleans in the War of 1812. The square is great not just for its central open space and historic showcasing, but it's also a great spot to see the Mississippi River and the levee disparity. It's really kind of trippy seeing the city's land being lower than the river's height. Heading south along the riverbanks takes you to steamboats, the city's downtown, and some great spots like the World War II Museum. I skipped it, but I heard it's awesome. The Aquarium and the Mardi Gras Museum. A little farther south is the Garden District. This is just kind of a suburban neighborhood, but with some really old historic mansions. This, like the French Quarter, is one of the areas visited by the Mardi Gras parade and celebration, as evidenced by the numerous beads strewn everywhere, pretty much. Also in this area is Lafayette Cemetery number 1. It's not the oldest cemetery, that would be the St. Louis cemeteries in the French Quarter, but those require a guide, so this is just potentially a little more convenient, and if it happens to be closed, there are cemeteries like this all over the city. Some with varying degrees of character and age, but all sharing the same iconic above-ground style.
So Lafayette 1 was closed, and you could only see it through the gate. So I went to number 2, and that has a really thin gate. It wasn't opened, but you could get a really good view of everything, so that was a little better. Now we're gonna head over to City Park.
New Orleans also has some great parks. Directly adjacent to the French Quarter is Louis Armstrong and Jazz National Historic Park. While a little on the smaller side, it's convenient and it has an interesting layout and statues. But the same can be said, and then some, for the much larger City Park, which is a bit of a drive to the west. Home to the city's art museum and Storyland, this park has tons of sports fields, botanic gardens, hiking, nature paths, scenic lakes, and waterways, where you might even see a gator or two. It's also a great place to unwind, take a nap, and use a public bathroom if you're traveling hobo style and living out of your car. Maybe even clean yourself up before a night on the town.
So my first time in New Orleans, I didn't really see much, and actually just went to that cemetery that we just passed. And I didn't really see too much else of the city because it stunk so bad. And I guess under this bridge, just homeless people taking shits all the time, because back when I first saw it, it was like 2008, kind of still a little soon after Hurricane Katrina, but there was definitely way more homeless people set up out there, and the scent isn't as bad, so, well, that's good. Okay, so I got one of those beignets things, and I already tell it's gonna be a mistake. Trying to eat that with a beard? Well, it was pretty good. Worth $3. It's just kind of like a, I don't know, donut or funnel cake. But if I want to get ants in my car, I think I'll clean all of this powdered sugar off.
While downtown has some decent casinos and some other random sights, no trip to New Orleans would be complete without a stroll down Bourbon Street at night. With the culturally iconic hype created by tons of Hollywood movies and Girls Gone Wild videos, Bourbon Street lives up to its reputation as one of America's great party spots. With jazz, blues, and every other themed bar you never thought of, Bourbon Street is lively, flashy, and has just enough chaos and grit without ever getting gross or dangerous.
So I hope you all enjoyed Louisiana and New Orleans and the bayou and the gumbo and the shrimpuses and gators and whatnot. It was a good time, I guarantee. Again, people of Louisiana, I know that's not how most of you talk, if any, but I tried.